You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Asa Winstanley here with my colleague Nora Barris Friedman. Earlier this month, Israel bombed Qatar's capital city, Doha, targeting Hamas's negotiating team, which had been meeting to discuss a US proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Israeli airstrike on Doha occurred despite the fact that the country hosts the Al Udeid air base, which is the largest US military installation in the entire region of West Asia, and it's the logistics HQ of the US occupation forces in Iraq. Trump's spokesperson later tried to weakly distance the US president from the attack, saying that it, quote, does not advance Israel or America's goals, and that he, quote, he felt, quote, very badly about the airstrike. But most analysts agree and say that it's almost impossible that the US did not green light the attack in advance in some capacity. Trump also said that he gave a full warning to the Qataris about the attack, implicitly admitting that he had prior knowledge. Meanwhile, 250 American lawmakers are on a propaganda visit to Israel. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar urged them to pursue expanded anti-boycott measures in their states. The lawmakers also planted 50 trees in the Nakab, a desert region in the south of historic Palestine. The 50 trees are said to correspond to each of the 50 US states, and the ceremony was organized by the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, which is a para-state organization which predates the establishment of Israel and which has for more than a century used tree planting as a cover to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their land. Well, joining us today to talk about all these political developments in Palestine and around the region is Dr. Sami Al-Arian, Professor of Public Affairs and the Director of the Center of Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Zaim University. Dr. Sami, welcome to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and it's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and my condolences to Ali and the family and the Electronic Intifada family.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. It's so good to have you with us. So let's start with talking about what happened in Doha recently, earlier this month. And this week, 60 Arab and Muslim member states gathered in Doha to discuss Israel's bombing of the Qatari capital. The attack drew criticism from Arab states, including Egypt, which has participated in the blockade of Palestinians. Do you think the Israeli attack on a U.S. ally will change the calculus of countries in the region and make them reconsider the reliability of the U.S.? How do you see this playing out?
Unfortunately, the meeting of the Arab and Muslim countries in Doha was very hot in rhetoric, but on substance, it was very, very poor. We saw that all the declarations that came at the end of this meeting did not attempt to anything that will make Israel actually blink twice about not repeating this act. Israel has been lashing left and right at all the different states in the region, not only ethnically cleansing Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and committing a genocide inside of Gaza now for almost 2 years, but also doing the same in many other parts. It's been lashing out and striking at Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, and lately Tunisia and Qatar. I've looked the historical narrative of if has ever been a country that was fighting more than 5 countries at a time in the past century, and even Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan did not fight more than 4 countries or 5 countries at a time. So we see here that Israel taking advantage of October 7th, trying to establish its hegemony over the region. And by doing that, it wanted to decapitate as many leaders, but also to finish off or impact the resistance, or what's called the axis of resistance. And we saw the devastation taking place today in Gaza. Netanyahu has been telling his people and promising them what he calls total and absolute victory. And he's been unable to deliver except the carnage and the killing and the massacres. He's not been able to bring the resistance to its heel. And because he hasn't been able to do that, he thought that by going after the leaders outside, since all his attempts in the past, killing Haniya and Sinwar and the leaders of Hezbollah in Lebanon, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, or even leaders in Iran and others, did not bring him this absolute and total victory. He thought he has an opportunity now to do this. And by doing that, he crossed not just international law and many red lines, but even he embarrassed the United States because he did it inside a country that is supposedly under the protection of the United States. It has the largest Air Force base outside the United States in Al Aidid. And it is unconscionable that someone is going to say that the United States was not part of this, because there is no way the Israelis would be hitting Qatar and going through its airspace, as well as airspace of several Arab countries, which is all of them, particularly the Gulf countries, under the protection of the United States, without the United States Central Command knowing about it. So for Trump or others to imply otherwise is disingenuous, to say the least, if they're not totally complicit in it. He regrets it, but he regrets it because it wasn't successful. The fact of the matter is that Israel did hit the building where the negotiators of the so-called Trump proposal to end the war and to free the captives, they were supposed, under the pressure of the Qatari government, who were pressured themselves by the Americans, that the Hamas leaders must give a response within 24 hours. They were pressured. The previous day, they held a meeting with the foreign minister, who also the prime minister of Qatar, and they promised him that tomorrow evening, that is the day that they were bombed, they were supposed to have been killed, they will give an answer. And they met, and usually they met where they're supposed to meet. It just happened that day also they changed the protocol of protections, where the phones were in one building and the leaders were in another building, and the missiles that were hit latched on the phones, and that's where the building that not only it killed some Qatari personnel, but also some other civilians, the people who were just happened to be there. I think at least 6 people have been declared dead and several injured. The point here is that Israel has no compunction, has no problem committing any war crime whatsoever. We have a person here, he is not only a wanted war criminal, he's also a genocider, a perpetrator of genocide, but he also is a failure. And this is very important to note, that he has not been able, he promised so many things that he hasn't been able to deliver, and now he's doubling down. The problem here has been really in the White House, because Israel doesn't care about the United Nations General Assembly, doesn't care about the International Court of Justice, doesn't care about the International Criminal Court, doesn't care about the European Union. And why would they care about 57 countries coming together to even not promise or pressure or do anything of substance? The problem is what happened in Doha with these Arab and Muslim countries. They were not even a paper tiger. They were not even a paper cat. They could not even scratch or do anything of significance. And that has been the problem all along. Unless the Muslim and Arab countries start pressuring the United States, they gave Trump several months ago, as he claims, trillions of dollars. Unless they start pressuring them that this is unacceptable, including the striking of an American, so-called an American ally, where a U.S. airbase exists with thousands and thousands of American soldiers, and they didn't care about that, then obviously there is nothing to be said, except that the United States is a problem, and it has to be dealt with. And the problem is that when the Arab and Muslim countries met in Doha, they did not really deal with that problem in any way, shape, or form.
So, from what you're saying, Dr. Sami, it sounds like, I mean, I was chuckling to myself there where you called the Arab states not even a paper tiger. I mean, I think that's quite apt. But, theoretically, I mean,
I think I said they're not even a paper cat.
Yes, indeed. It's very apt. I mean, it sounds like, from what you're saying, that there's no political will there from the leaders of the Arab states to actually do anything about this and to change anything. But theoretically, do they have any kind of leverage they could use if there was that political will, say, in an ideal situation? Do they have any kind of leverage they could use to force a change and a course of action from the US administration?
Absolutely, they do. The problem is there is no sovereignty, there is no independence. Most of these leaders, unfortunately, and the countries are client states, and they're afraid that if they start using this leverage, that somehow they will either be deposed or that they will be somehow pressured in a way that they cannot sustain it. Let me just give you two tools that the US uses against the Arab and Muslim countries. Now, you have two types of countries. You have the rich countries, in which they have been pressured to invest trillions of dollars in the US economy. It's estimated the Gulf countries alone have upward of $2 trillion invested in the US economy. They know if they start taking different policies or policies that will displease the United States, that the US could actually go and confiscate that money in the same way they confiscated $300 billion of Russian money after the Ukraine war. So they are basically trying to not anger the US in any way so that they will not be either deposed, because the US could actually undermine their governments, or actually confiscate or bring problems for them. Several years ago, I think it was in 2018, where there was a law in Congress, a bill in Congress that passed. It's called the JASTA bill. The JASTA bill was aimed at Saudi Arabia. Basically, it allowed the American government to weaponize 9/11 by giving the families of the victims of 9/11 the ability to go to court and extort the Saudis out of literally trillions of dollars, but only if and only if the Secretary of State would allow it. In other words, when the Secretary of State would tell the courts that the families could actually go and file lawsuits against the Saudi government, then they can go thousands asking for trillions. So the Saudis understand that, and unfortunately, they have succumbed to it instead of pressuring them. Now, the other tool used against poor countries, those countries who do not have the oil money or the petrodollar that the US utilizes, it gives them money and load them with loans until they have enough loans that they can't repay. And then it comes and tell them, if they do not toe the line, if they do not challenge US policy or US hegemony, it's going to destroy their economies. In 2018, again, Trump tweeted 5 words to Turkey. He says, "I can destroy Turkish economy." The second day, the lira fell by 40%. Why? Because Turkey is loaded with $550 billion of loans that it can't repay unless they reschedule the loans or work out another terms for it. So most of these countries are not truly independent, even if they have the best of intentions, because they know about the consequences. So that's the answer to this part of the question. But what leverage they have plenty of leverage. As I said, if the Arab countries stop, I wouldn't even call it stop, just ask for different kind of money than the petrodollar, because if they stop if they can accept other currencies, and they now, there's a lot of noise about this, and the US is very nervous about this, that will put a lot of pressure on the US dollar, and within few months, not years, the dollar will crash, and that would be a huge problem for the US. They can also start withdrawing their investments. If they just draw 10% a month, I can guarantee you within 2 months, this war would stop tomorrow, if not within a week or two. There are a lot of things they can do. They can break relations, they can freeze relations, they can go after Israel in the United Nations. There's a lot to be done here, but the problem, again, there is no willpower, because they are all afraid of what Uncle Sam would do to them.
Yeah, as we mentioned at the beginning there's the issue of the military bases as well, right?
Absolutely.
The US power,
Absolutely.
military power is ensconced across the whole region.
There are 60 over, I counted about 63 military bases. There could be more. Israel just had another 6 military bases opened in the areas that they occupied after the Syrian regime fell. So you have military bases all over the place. And again, you have to go back and see what is the real goal here. The real goal here is to establish Israeli hegemony. That's from the Israeli standpoint. That's what they are working for, and to establish greater Israel. But when you look deep down, both of these goals actually will be against US interests, because what will happen if Israel indeed establishes this, and I think I have great doubt about the ability for them to actually establish hegemony or even establish greater Israel, because I don't think that is also achievable. But let's assume that they do achieve that. That's going to be contrary to policy and goals in the region. It's going to destabilize the region, and it's going to actually empower every country here to be afraid that they could be next. And therefore, I'm not sure what the Trump administration is thinking if they allow this to happen. Apparently, you have a White House who is as Zionist as not even as Likud, but even as Smotrich and Ben Gvir. They're trying to establish, and their ambassador expresses this every single day, greater Israel. And what's going to happen to the Palestinians? They are actually lobbying very hard, many countries around the world, to take the Palestinians and displace them in different parts of the world. Just imagine what kind of a word that would establish if actually you're able to take 2 million Gazans and displace them in different countries, how that's going to appear. There is no international law anymore. There is no international standards or norms. We're talking about a genocide and ethnic cleansing that is unprecedented in modern history. I don't think they can pull it off, but they're going to end up with their reputation basically in the gutter. And that there will be, Nora was asking earlier, what would be the consequences? The consequences is that the resistance really has no options anymore. They are not going to negotiate under these circumstances. They know that what Israel and the United States are asking basically is for its demise. Ruby was very clear about that. And therefore, they will fight to the bitter end. And to fight to the bitter end, that means the tragedy is going to continue. And since you have no options but to resist, then the change has to come from the people of conscience around the world. We are witnessing a genocide unprecedented in history. And when I say that, I say it fully knowing that what happened during World War II and others, there were obviously a tremendous amount of suffering and genocide and so on and so forth. But a lot of them were speculated. They were not being shown to the world day in and day out. People would see it. People would hear about it. People will gossip about it. But we know most of what happened after the war ended. But now
the Holocaust was conducted in secret for the most part, right? Only not very many people knew about it.
That's exactly right. Most of the stories that we know, most of the horrible stories we know about what happened then, it all came after the war ended, not during. But now we're seeing it. So we are witnessing the actual perpetrators, and we're seeing also how the world is reacting, and it is shameful on the whole world. But we have to put who the actual perpetrators are. They basically are Israel and the United States, and the whole world is just watching, which does not absolve them from the responsibility of stopping this. But what we have to do about it is to awaken the world's conscience and continue the campaign of pressure until this horrible war ends.
I mean, it really feels like we've entered into this new phase, this new world where a genocide can be live streamed for 2 years. The negotiators can be targeted for assassination in a host country that is allied with the US, and there will be no consequences. The prime minister of a different country, Yemen, and his entire cabinet can be assassinated with barely a peep from, the so-called international community. The United Nations can declare that it's a genocide. The International, Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice can both, issue warrants and declare genocide and say that member states have an obligation to stop it. The only state that is stopping it is Yemen, which is being bombed by the genocider state. And like, how do we understand what is left of the ghost maybe of the so-called international rules-based order, international law at this point? And what is the future of so-called political negotiations if one rogue state that is committing a genocide is allowed to try to assassinate the negotiations team? How do you see this? What reality are we now in?
There is no more international system. That international system, which was established primarily by the United States in the aftermath of World War II, that was leading it for most of the past 80 years or so. It has established international institutions in order to establish an American empire and global hegemony within the rules that it set itself, and it set these institutions. That system has come and crashed down after October 7th, and it primarily because of not only of the Zionist regime's behavior and conduct and genocide, but because the United States allowed it to happen. And it allowed it to happen, by the way, by both administrations, Democratic and Republican. You can't just blame Trump on this. You have to put it in the context of this whole U.S. global system that it established. Both administrations allowed it to be crashed down or to crash down. And in this situation, where do we go from here? Obviously, that's going to depend pretty much on how this war ends. If this war ends with Israel having, and I don't believe that's the case, but let's assume that Israel ends this, what they call total victory, that they are able to impose their will and establish greater Israel, and all these illusions that they are trying to establish, then obviously we are in a world where might is right, and therefore, you're living in the law of the jungle. There is no laws anymore. Anybody can do whatever they please. Israel wants a complete free hand in the region. It wants to dictate to every country in the region how they should live, what kind of political system they should have, what kind of military they should have. It wants to fragment Syria into 4 different countries: a Druze, an Alawite, a Sunni, and the Kurdish regions. It wants to impose a different system, different geopolitical system in the region, and wants the United States basically to back it all the way. It wants to dictate who can have what kind of technology and who can't have this kind of technology, what kind of parties and political groups can exist and what they can't exist, who would be called a legitimate and who would be called illegitimate, and all that. So this is one country, basically. You call it a rogue country, but it wants to impose its hegemony and to be above the law. So you will have 2 countries in the world who will be totally above the law, and they will tell what everybody else what the law that they should be adhering to is going to be. That's one system that they're trying to impose. The other system is that you have to change what it means to live in a lawful or illegal system or legal regime around the world. Now you could see, for instance, in the BRICS different institutions, whether they are political or economic, they're trying to very slowly come up with a legal system and with an economic system and with a trade system and with a political system that would be more representative of the people. The United States wants to ignore this, but I think the overriding situation here is that China, which is very slowly leading this transformation, does not want a direct confrontation with the United States, and it wants to establish this regime over time. They call it strategic patience. But of course, Gaza cannot wait for that, and many other countries can't wait for that. So we're living into a transient period, the period between this lawless situation that was imposed on the world because of the Israeli behavior and American complicity. And we have this transformation, or this new world that is being formed right now, mostly in the global south, in addition to China and Russia. And they're trying to come up with this system, which for the most part, Europeans and Americans are ignoring. So where does it take us? It would take us, I believe, whether accelerated or in reverse, depending on the outcome of the Gaza war. That's why the Gaza war is beyond simply the survival of the Palestinians or what's happening to the Palestinians. It's really the survival of the whole system in the world. People talk about two-state solution now. Now, somehow this became very attractive to many countries around the world, after ignoring it for 3 decades. And they're trying to salvage whatever could be salvaged in their view of the Zionist project. The Zionist project has come to its end. And when you come to your end, you start lashing out and committing all kinds of crimes, all kinds of atrocities, all kinds of massacres, thinking that this is going to save you. But in fact, it delegitimizes your existence to the point that you no longer could be supported by anyone. The only friend that the Israelis have today, and when I mean only, I mean it, it's just the US and some of the stooges around the globe. Some of these countries that they got their independence from the US, but they get budgets from the US, Nauru, Marshall Islands, got those, these small countries that have a few thousands living here and there. And everybody else is on the other side. How can you survive in a world like this? Al-Aqsa was it's an eye-opening, and it has devastated certainly Gaza and the Palestinians. And we can talk about that. And your news report was taken about much of the suffering taking place today, unprecedented. But at the same time, it has exposed the Zionist enterprise and the Zionist regime to the point where it becomes extremely difficult for any person, rational person or person of conscience, who can defend what they are doing there. And when you see, that's the silver lining you could see that this is not going to be a panacea. This is not going to be an answer. Greater Israel is not going to be established at the ruins of everybody in this region. That we are dealing with madmen. We're dealing with genociders. We're dealing with people who have no legitimacy, actually, because they've lost not only their humanity, they lost any rationality when they come and target babies and buildings and trees and everyone in Gaza and the region, thinking that this is how they're going to establish deterrence and this is how they're going to establish hegemony, and by that they can feel that somehow they are safe. That's beyond being crazy. That is just really sociopaths we're dealing with, and I don't think the world would accept such state, because that's going to doom everyone, not just the genociders.
Well, Dr. Sami, you mentioned there the so-called two-state solution, and recently several Western countries have been moving towards a recognition of the so-called Palestinian state, in reality recognition of the Palestinian Authority. Now, of course, at the same time, Israel is moving from de facto control of the occupied West Bank to a more explicit ambition of de jure annexations, that is, annexation in law, in the actual Israeli law. Why do you think this is happening now, and how do you view the situation on the ground?
Let's recall how we got to this point of two-state solution, because Israel, when it was established back in 1948, it was established on the notion that there will be a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Palestinians, the natives of the land, rejected this. There were only 6.5% of the land was under Zionist possession. And that is not a figure I'm making up. This is the figure that the United Nations actually, when they sent a commission to find out how much the Palestinians or the Arabs owned and how much Jews owned at the time, it was determined that they only have 6.5%. And they were trying to allot 55% of the land under so much pressure from the Zionists, particularly in Britain and the United States, to give them a shot at having a Jewish state. The Palestinians rejected that and said, we accepted the presence of Jewish immigrants from Europe because Europe was racist and was persecuting its Jews, but we're not going to accept these people to come and have sovereignty and take our land. And then the Zionist movement, which was preparing for this moment under a 30-year mandate, British mandate, in which Palestinians were prevented from even owning a gun, and they were subjected to all kinds of laws that will have execution, that the court will execute any Palestinian who was even owning a gun. And by the end of this process, 78% of Palestinian land was taken by the newly formed Zionist state. Then in 1967, they went after the whole thing because that was the plan all along. And then we had the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, in which the PLO, which was shared by different Palestinian factions, found themselves in the cold because they sided with Saddam. And they were told by the United States then, that was the first Bush administration, if they can accept a Jewish state or an Israeli state, they can get something. And of course, that path started right after the 1973 war. But keep in mind that the PLO was established in 1964. It was not established to have a Palestinian state in 1967 because it was established before 1967. And that meant that they want to liberate Palestine and get the Palestinians back. But they accept this, in a very bitter way in 1988 after the first Intifada by the prodding and the pressure of the US. And then by 1993, they had an agreement, which is called the Oslo Accord, which was predicated on the understanding that, okay, the Palestinians who signed that at that time, Yasser Arafat and his colleagues, that they will accept Israel on 78%, provided that Israel will give back 22%. That was termed the two-state solution. Keep in mind that was what the Palestinians signed, which basically was recognizing Israel. That is the current borders of Israel at the time. The Israelis signed that the PLO would be the spokesperson that will speak on behalf of the Palestinians. That's it. They did not agree to a two-state solution. And throughout these negotiations that started with agreements in 1994, that they were supposed to conclude in 5 years in 1999, which they didn't. And then they had a Camp David, which did not present the Palestinians with anything that would even give this minimum. The Israelis always had in mind that they want to absorb this land piece by piece. And they were never serious about two-state solution. Even in the aftermath of, or in the waning days of the Obama administration in December 2016, John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State at the time, gave a speech in which he says the two-state solution is dead, and it's dead because of Israeli settlements and Israeli policy. He just said that. So this notion that there is a two-state solution, that somehow there is a horizon for a two-state solution, is just an illusion. Everybody knows it's dead. Everybody didn't do anything about it. Everybody knew that they put everything in the hands of the Americans, who were just basically whatever the Israelis want, they gave them. They never really pressured them in a way that they will make it happen. And that's where we ended up. Israel had to choose 2 out of 3 things. They wanted to be Jewish, they wanted to be democratic, they wanted the whole land. Well, if you want to have a land and be called democratic, that's a one-state solution, one man, one vote. No, we can't have the Arabs with us. We are the chosen race. We have to have our Jewish. Then you have to have Jewish. Then you need the majority Jewish. That means you give the Palestinians something, 22%, and you become a Jewish majority. And democratic, no, we want the land. So they wanted all 3, so they ended up with apartheid, because you have a domination of one race or of one people over the other. But that's a problem. Over the long term, no one is going to accept apartheid to be the order of the day. So now they found an opportunity with this current situation, is that we can keep the land, we can keep calling ourselves a Jewish state, we can keep calling ourselves a democratic state, we can get rid of the Palestinians through genocide through ethnic cleansing. Let's do genocide in Gaza, get as many Palestinians out of Gaza as possible. We'll follow that up with another ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. We've solved all three. Now we kept the land. We can call ourselves Jewish. We can call ourselves democratic, and hell with the word. Who cares about the word? That's the situation we're in. So this, for people to come now and act like this two-state solution was an option all along, is just disingenuous, to say the least, if not totally laughable. The current administration, the current Palestinian Authority in the form of Mahmoud Abbas, you can't find any person among the Palestinians ever, not in the past, I don't think even in the future, possibly you can find someone who will collaborate completely with what you want. He's willing to sign whatever it takes, but what they're offering him cannot be called any kind of this. But again, the Israelis never had any intention to give the Palestinians anything. Now you have Smotrich and Ben Gvir joining the government, which is the most racist, fascist, Nazi type government in the history of that state. He came, they were empowered in December 2022. In January 2023, just within a few weeks of coming to power, he said Palestinians have three options. One, they can submit to a Jewish state, to Jewish law, that they can't have civil or political rights. They can live here at our leisure, at our permission, and they have to submit to that. They have to know this, and they have to live with it, which is basically a third, fourth, fifth class citizen. And if they don't accept it, and he said, I understand that, they can be compensated and they can leave. The third option is death. This is one of the reasons why we had to fund Al-Aqsa. Palestinians had no horizons whatsoever. Sinwar, who was ruling Gaza in 2017, tried everything in his power to try to find a solution. Gaza was under siege for 16 years. He tried to say to Mahmoud Abbas, come and take it, come and rule it, and try to lift the siege. He couldn't, because the Americans would not allow him to. The Israelis would not allow him to. He will have this great march of return in 2018 in trying to tell the people, we are peacefully demonstrating, do something about this siege, do something about our people. Everybody ignored them. They were killing them. Dozens and over hundreds of people were killed during that march. He came and offered Israel a truce. He said, let's have a truce, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, lift the siege, and let's see what we can do about this. Let's negotiate. And I give full permission. This is Sinwar now. I will give full authority for Abbas to go and negotiate. The Israelis entertained this because they liked the fact that they could have a Gaza administration, West Bank administration, so that they can continue with their plan of trying to annex Palestine and settle piece by piece. So, and then at the end, he tried everything and didn't help. And that's what you had October 7th. It was a prison break. It was people who, you were just boiling them, and finally they will explode. That's what we have. There is no two-state solution for the Europeans and the Arabs to come and hide behind this, because no one wants to confront Israel. No one wants to confront the United States. They know that this is not going anywhere, that these are just vain political victory, that they're not going to reach. I mean, it's good to have that. It's good to have the whole world on one side and the US and Israel on the other side. That's great. But the question is not that. Will it actually be implemented? And if it's not going to get implemented, so what are they going to do about that? What's the next step? Nothing. That's the problem. For 30 years, since Oslo now, 32 years, has there been any repercussion, any consequence for Israeli refusal, for the Israeli intransigence, for the Israeli belligerence? Ever. They bomb Syria, they bomb Lebanon, they bomb Iraq, they bomb Tunisia, they bomb Qatar, they bomb, of course, the West Bank. I mean, can anybody see beyond what we can see in Gaza today? I don't think there is anything beyond that in human history that people could see, as Nora says, live streaming a genocide. Nothing. Nothing is being done to them. So why would they care about two-state or whatever you care? They don't care. You look at what with Russia. They can't even play a soccer game. Israel, they can play soccer. They can have music festivals. They can send delegations. Of course, it's great that part of the world is waking up today. And I think over time, they're going to be isolated. But the question is, would it be enough? Well, that remains to be seen. I think our battle is not only in Palestine, our battle over the United States. The people in the United States, they will have to see what's actually being done in their name. You have to break this grip, this Zionist grip on American policy. I personally think that they have, with the Epstein file, because it does not, it's not rational what Trump is doing. He has basically sold out completely to some maniac, and they must have something against him. I mean, the more you look into this, the more you're sure of this. I mean, with his history and with his behavior and with his friendship with Epstein and all that. So how can you allow politicians, you got 250 people going there kissing the behinds of this small state that will actually, you're the laughing stock. America is the laughing stock of the world. Not only that people resent such policy, but they laugh at it. They don't see America as a superpower or as a leading power or as someone who could actually be emulated or even admired, or somebody who can lecture people on democracy and human rights and the rule of law and all that. All that is nonsense, and that's what's happening to the world. So this whole notion, people are waking up after Tufan al-Aqsa, after October 7th, to the world that they see back, what they were living under for the past 30, 40 years as being a lie, just a big lie. And therefore they want to have change, not only change, radical change, because they can't accept their current realities anymore. That's going to take time. You look at Americans who are under 30 today. I just saw a report about even Republicans under 30. Only 24% Republicans now support Israel. That means the overwhelming majority of Republican youth are detesting what Israel is doing, not only in Palestine, but also what's doing inside the United States. So for that to take place, when you talk about this in 10 years, 20 years, these people are going to become the leaders, the decision makers of tomorrow. And that's why they are terrified. That's why they think this is our perfect opportunity to go and establish greater Israel, because before it becomes too late. But I think it's too late already. I think they have been exposed. They have been shown to the whole world that what we're dealing with here are people who are the highest, or the epic of everything that is wrong in the world, everything that is evil in the world, and therefore people of conscience are starting to do something about it. I think the political class is the last to change. Usually, you go through 4 phases for every transformation, for every change. You start with the people, and after you have enough people speaking out and standing up, it goes to the media, and with the media, then you get slowly the political class, and the final change comes from law, because that's how things are in the United States. Now we've got the people, and this is going to increase. This is going to be more, not less. And slowly, media outlets like yours and others, and even some of the right-wingers are starting to speak out. And that's great. And then very slowly, we're going to get some of the political class. And finally, that's when a big change will take place. But also it has to come from the region, not just from your side of the world.
Dr. Sami, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to kind of get your take on the escalating and always intensifying crackdowns on activism, and particularly student activism on campuses across the U.S. This is, the 250 U.S. lawmakers who are on a propaganda visit to Israel, being encouraged by high-level Israeli war crime suspects to crack down on free speech rights in their own states back home. This is after, of course, decades of legislation at the local, state, and federal levels across the country designed to silence criticism of Israel. Dr. Sami, you, of course, were targeted in the U.S. for your activism and speech more than 2 decades ago. You were indicted by the U.S. in 2003 for alleged support of the Palestinian armed group Islamic Jihad. Despite the U.S. spending millions on a lengthy and absurd trial, a federal jury could not convict you on a single count. And then after a decade of pursuing you and your family, in this vindictive prosecution, the U.S. eventually dropped all charges and deported you to Turkey. What do you make of the current U.S. crackdown on anti-genocide activists in the U.S. today? And they're now, the U.S. government is now trying to deport Mahmoud Khalil, the grad student from Columbia University, who is in ICE detention for 100 days. They want to deport him to Syria or Algeria. How do you see all of this? And what does that say about, what does it say about the state of so-called free speech in this country?
Well, it's another attempt by the desperate Zionists to silence pro-Palestinian activism in the United States. For many years, they were ignoring these voices. But when some of these voices got enough attention from the political class, like what happened with me, they took advantage of 9/11 in order to silence me and others. But now it's coming to a very critical situation where it's not just the political class that could actually be influenced. We're talking about the whole sea of change within the US population. That's a huge problem for Zionists. And they don't know how to handle it. I mean, they have really, really big problem with handling it. They thought in the past they can ignore it. They can't ignore it anymore. They thought that they can go through some underhanded tactics, firing people from their jobs, going after them in the media, calling them anti-Semite, whatever. That's not working anymore. Even the media now is turning them. The media can't ignore forever the fact that you have a genocide. Not even the New York Times and the Washington Post, despite their slanted reporting, or CNN and other media outlets. Forget about Fox, because they are in that corner. So when you look at all this, they're having real problems. So their last straw is to go after them by frightening them, by scaring them, by putting them in jail. It's the same thing that in the past, even though this is much worse than what was in the past called the McCarthy era, this is much, much worse, actually. In the McCarthy era, you still had the government, even though they were using it, it was there for a few years, but at the end, they have to back off because the whole thing was not working. And it came at the same time that you have a civil rights movement in which they had to give in. And you still had some also politicians who were not necessarily buying this this kind of episode, this kind of story. Now you have a problem because the politicians now will have to make choices. And we see that because the people are involved in a big way now, that could actually take place. And that is frightening them. Look at what's happening in the New York mayoral race, with Mamdani. If he gets elected, that's a huge thing. That means the people now are starting to see what it means to be an independent, to be patriot, to be somebody who cares about the country versus someone who sold out to the Zionist narrative and sold out to the Zionist power and Zionist money. And again, that will make, because that's what they relied on. They relied on the ignorance of the people. They relied on the media being in their corner that they can control and they can dictate to. And they relied on political money in which they can buy off politicians. Now, all that is being dismantled one by one. And that's what you're seeing today. What you're seeing is the reaction to this possibility that the youth could actually change in a very fundamental way. And they're going to lash out with every possible tool at their disposal. They're going to have the FBI going after people. They're going to have the police, the local police. They're going to have these big companies and media outlets and the government, but they will fail because that's too late for now. I think people have seen what's happening in Gaza, and they have woken up, and now they understand that this is a country that has been hijacked by these forces, and they're trying to take their country back. That's going to be a struggle. There will be a lot of victims, and there will be a lot of people who will pay heavy price. But I think it's within the American people to make that change. I just want to say one more thing, if I can, because you asked me about the two-state solution earlier, because I think the two-state solution is it's not a solution at all, because the Zionist movement and the Zionist regime have exposed themselves to be this kind of genocidal polity and genocidal people, and therefore for them to act like that they can coexist with others is just is just not correct and not true and not believable. And therefore, our only solution, people have to come to this realization, whether now or whenever they think about this deeply, is that the only way we have to go the route of how apartheid ended in South Africa. We have to dismantle the institutions of apartheid in order to get a just society even though they have problems, but to get a just society, you have to go after the institutions. And therefore, our solution to the problems in Gaza, in Palestine, is that all these Zionist, racist, supremacist institutions must be dismantled. And therefore, we need to think not as a Palestinian problem. We need to have a paradigm shift. This is an Israeli problem that the whole world must unite in confronting. We need to confront these Zionist structures. We need to dismantle the Zionist structures. And therefore, that's the only solution so that justice could be reestablished in the Holy Land and reestablished around the world. And as long as you have Zionist institutions, these supremacist minds who would like to be the hegemon, not only Palestine, not only in the region, but in the whole world. They want to dictate to the Americans what they think and what they say and what they write and how they live. That cannot be accepted. Now it's affecting you. It's affecting your right to think and your right to speak and your right to assemble and your right to associate and your right to buy or not buy, to boycott or not boycott. That is just not the life that you want. These structures have to be dismantled. These structures have to be confronted. And for them to be confronted, people have to start thinking deeply about these modes of resistance in order to bring these structures down.
Yeah. Dr. Sami Al-Arian, we always learn so much from you and are always so grateful for your analysis. And we'd love to have you back on sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for being on the Electronic Intifada live stream today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'll be very delighted to come at any time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Sami.
Thank you.